Hi, I'm supernatural thriller author J.F. Penn, and you're listening to Genretainment.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Genretainment at sci-fi-pulse-radio.com. We're your hosts, Marks
and Julie. Genretainment is where we talk about what's happening in the world of film, TV, books, and web series. We give you interviews with writers, directors, producers, and actors in both independent and not so independent creations. Now this is episode 115, and we are chatting with author and YouTuber Michael La Ronn.
Michael La Ronn writes what he calls fearless science fiction and fantasy. His writing's filled with strange worlds and quirky humor featuring unusual, non-traditional heroes such as teddy bears, vegetables, and androids. But don't worry, not all in the same book.
What about a vegetable teddy bear android?
I don't know. Maybe later.
Oh, okay.
Michael also writes nonfiction for authors who are stuck in the awkward phase between beginner and bestseller. He hosts the growing YouTube channel Author Level Up, which publishes writing, craft, business, and marketing videos for authors every week.
Now, Michael devoted himself to writing life in 2012 after he was hospitalized with a dangerous sickness. They talk about that life-changing moment and why he chose the indie author path. We also learn about his books, his YouTube channel, and he shares a number of excellent tips for any writer listening. But before we get started with the interview, we should point out that the music you just heard at the beginning of the show was a snippet from the theme song for our web series, Reality on Demand. It was a song composed and performed by our friend T. Sean Hardy. And you can find our web series at realityondemandseries.com. Now let's get started with our interview with Michael La Ronn.
Well, hi, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Marks. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I've been listening to your YouTube channel, Author Level Up. I've been really enjoying it. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about your many books. You've been a prolific author here for the last couple years. But before we do that, let's talk about how did you get started with your writing in the first place?
Yeah, well, it's great to be on the show, and I have to apologize in the background. I have a rampant 2-year-old, and she's a bit more energetic tonight than usual. But yeah, I got started as a writer. My career, as I know it, began in 2012. My wife and I went out for a great dinner. We were out on the town, and all of a sudden, I ate some great food, and I fell ill the next night. And it turns out I had a really bad bout of food poisoning. And I was in the hospital for a month, long story short. The crazy thing about it was, up until that point, I had been a writer. I had written things, but I didn't know what the vision was, right? I wrote short stories and poems, but I just never really serious about it. And being on the hospital bed definitely makes you rethink your life, especially when you're there a month. And I swore to myself on that hospital bed that I was going to do this. I was going to be a writer, and no matter what it took, I would do it. And I would learn what I needed to learn, and I went out and did it and published my first book in 2014. So that's my start. I guess I could give you the cliche answer and say that I've always been a writer, but I guess my writer career as I know it began on the hospital bed.
Did you self-publish that book?
Yes. My first book was How to Be Bad, and I chose to self-publish it. And mostly because I'm not a guy that likes to play by the rules. I'd spent a lot of time in the literary world trying to, shop short stories and poems and manuscripts to publishers, and wasn't having much luck with it. And, I said, I'm going to pick myself. I'm going to choose myself, and I'm not going to pay someone or, stand in line to get rejected. So I figured I'd take my destiny into my own hands.
Now, would you ever decide to publish with a traditional publisher, or are you just all like just indie only?
It's funny. It would have to be the right deal. I have more experience with contracts and negotiating contracts than most of the author population, just because of virtue of my day job. By day, I'm an insurance industry professional, and I deal with contracts pretty much on a daily basis. So I have not seen a publishing contract that honestly could be negotiated into favorable terms for me based on my career. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't do the right deal if it came across the table. But I prefer indie because of the control it gives me over my work. I like the fact that I can have an artistic vision. And yeah, I really enjoy that. So that's my favorite part of it.
Of course, when you're self-publishing or when you're an indie author, you have some upfront expenses that you wouldn't normally have. Can you talk a little bit about those expenses and also some of the challenges you faced starting out?
Well, any indie author is going to have two major expenses when they publish their book. And the first is going to be cover design and then editing. Both of those will probably cost you about a couple $100 each. Those are the major upfront costs. There are the setup costs. I mean, you have to launch your website. There's fees associated with your mailing list and things like that. But really, to get started, that's really the upfront cost. But the best way to really think about that, and a lot of people balk at the idea of paying a lot of money to publish a book, right? That if you've never published anything before, $800 or $1,000, that makes me really nervous. But you really should think about your work as property that appreciates over time. Mm-hmm. So every book that you write, every short story that you write, it's like property that's going to grow in value. So yes, you have to pay that $800 or $1,000 or whatever that might be, but that's going to continue earning money for you for the life of the author plus 70 years with the copyright. So, an $800 investment, a $1,000 investment pays off over time.
Mm-hmm. I liked your Android X cover, the first book. So
thank you. Yeah, that's the key, finding good cover designers, and I had a great designer for that one.
Yeah, it's very eye-catching. Any other, challenges you faced when you first tried to become an indie author? How did you really learn how to do that? Because you're very knowledgeable about indie writing. Your he won't say podcast because we're on a podcast right now, but your YouTube channel is packed with information.
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm the kind of person that just likes to go and learn. So it's kind of funny because on Author Level Up, my YouTube channel, I have a lead magnet that I just launched this morning. And it's basically a list of everything I went out and learned. So in 2014, I basically sat down and looked at every area of what I thought a successful author needed to know. And I made a list, and I systematically went after everything on that list day by day and just learned it. I just have that kind of encyclopedic personality, so that comes naturally to me. But the great thing about this profession, compared to maybe musicians or other professions where you have professionals, the indie author space or the publishing space is great because there are so many podcasts and so many books and so many courses and materials and resources that are available to authors at little to no cost that allow them to go out and learn things, learn what I know. Learn what the great authors and the great author entrepreneurs like Joanna Penn know. Never been easier than it is now to get that information, and it's out there. All you have to do is look for it.
What genres or other works like books, TV shows have influenced you as an author?
Sure. I always loved science fiction. Mm-hmm. Ray Bradbury was that author that I read, and the light bulb just went up over my head. I guess love his writing, and it's just he's the one that made me fall in love with science fiction. So Ray Bradbury was a huge influence for me. I love short stories. That's how I got my start. So I love the original short story writers like Elizabeth Bowen and Bernard Malamud and a lot of the Bradbury short stories. And those influenced me. But I'd probably say my biggest influences would be video games. So the Final Fantasy series. It just hit me at the right time when I was growing up that it just left such an impression on me that's had a huge impact on my work. And graphic novels and comics. I was always a huge fan of those growing up.
Great. I think you're the first person that said video games. So that's
really?
Yeah.
Awesome. It's first.
So, what's your ideal writing method for your book? I know it's probably going to vary based on what's happening in your life when you're doing that book or even approaching that story. But, do you tend to be more of a plotter or a pantser?
Yeah, these days I'm more of a pantser. Mm-hmm. When I wrote my first book, everything was meticulously plotted out. I mean, I had everything planned down. The only thing I didn't plan were the sentences. And that was a pretty rigid way of writing. But now these days, as I've written each progressive novel, I've gotten better at becoming more efficient writing novels. And most of the time these days, I write my novels in 3 drafts. I like the method by Dean Wesley Smith that's writing into the dark. So I basically I sit down, I start typing, and I just follow my subconscious, and I just go down the path wherever it leads me, and I find that it takes me to some really interesting places, and I just go with that, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a really neat book because it's the first book I've seen that kind of takes an approach towards pantsing rather than just say, go off and do whatever you want. It has a method to it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I am, above all things, I always pay very close attention to what my creative voice or my subconscious is telling me. I've learned over the years that when you get away from that, that's when you start producing work that you're not happy with. And if you're going to write work that you're not happy with, why do it, right? And so that's the greatest part is being able to sit down every day and just kind of see where my brain takes me. It's just tons of fun.
How long does it take you to write one of your books?
It depends. It's a big fat depends. Nonfiction, I usually write a little bit faster. Fiction, it's a big question mark. If it's an interactive novel, that takes a lot longer, but probably a few months per novel.
You have a day job. Is it tough to find time to write?
No, it's actually not for me. And one of the things that I've done early on when I chose this lifestyle, I said that I would eliminate anything in my life that did not have to do with writing. So I'm a pretty boring guy on the weekends, honestly. My wife and I, we have family time and all of that, but writing and family is really the big thing for me. I wake up every morning at 4:30 a.m. So that is the time when I know that I'm guaranteed to have quiet in the house.
Mhm.
So I write from 4:30 to the time it's time for me to go to work, about 8 o'clock. And I go to work and I have a pretty demanding day job. Can't get any writing done there. And I come home and have family time, dinner, do some housework. And when it's time to put my daughter to bed, I usually write for about an hour, hour and a half before it's time to go to bed. So all in all, on an average day, I probably have about 3 hours to write, maybe more, maybe less, depending on if I'm sick. And if you do the math on that, that's 3 hours a day times 7, that's 21 hours times 4, which is 84. So I have 84 hours a month, that I can use to write. And when you think about it like that, that's a whole heck of a lot of time.
Mhm.
And on that budget of time, I've used that over the last couple of years to write over 20 books, almost 100 short stories, almost 100 poems, growing YouTube channel on Author Level Up, where I've published almost 100 videos. So it's just a testament to what you can do when you really just sit down and have a laser-like focus on your career.
Now we're going to talk a little bit real quick here about decision select novels, your decision select novels, which is like choose your own fate, choose your own adventure type books, which I always loved. Before we talk too much about how you make those, how long do those take? Because I imagine that interactive element, having to map that out, would be a little harder.
They take about twice as long, but yeah, they're labors of love.
So tell us a little bit about them. What are they?
Yeah, well, you kind of alluded to the genesis. Probably a lot of people listening to this have read the Choose Your Own Adventure novels as kids. I read them myself in the 90s and just fell in love with them. And I was just captivated by the way that they told stories in such a unique and innovative way. And those are some of the books that really made me fall in love with fiction as a young boy. And, I think a lot of people probably had that same opinion of the books. And a couple of years ago, I was just sitting around one day, as ideas come into my head, and I was thinking, whatever happened to those novels? I hadn't really seen them since the 90s, and I went and looked for them, and I just wanted to know, like, what is the author of those Choose Your Own Adventure books doing now? And are there any of these books for adults? And I didn't find very much. I found that the books were in ebook form, but, the ebook versions were kind of a little, they were a little awkward, and the genre really didn't age that well. And so I thought, well, what would it be like if there was an interactive novel for adults that took advantage of e-readers and e-reading technology? Because it was kind of a new area. No one had really, there had been a couple people that had dabbled with it, but most of the books were variations on the Choose Your Own Adventure genre. Mm-hmm. So I sat down and thought, well, how can I do that? What would an interactive novel in the 21st century look like? And I wrote a book that was specifically for the ebook audience. And I did some deviations from the genre that are a lot different from the Choose Your Own Adventure novels, but also pay homage to it. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that make my decision select novels, and that's what I call them, decision select novels. Kids choose, adults decide. So that's kind of the branding for that. But they take, instead of the second person point of view, they take place in the head of a character, a well-established character, and the reader makes decisions for that character. So, for example, in How to Be Bad, which is one of my decision select novels, I describe that as an ethical train wreck on every page. It's about a woman who accidentally makes a deal with a demon, and she has to steal the souls of 3 innocent people in order to break the contract. And, she's this really nice girl. She's kind of a doormat. Someone steals her job from underneath her, and, she can't stand up for herself. And this demon shows up one day and says, hey, I'll help you get revenge. So she falls for it, and then all of a sudden she's roped into this contract where she has to steal these souls. Well, she's this really nice girl. So how is she going to do this? And there's all kinds of ethical dilemmas that she has to do to figure out how she's going to break this contract, but is she going to steal the souls? And it's a lot of fun, and there's just a lot of interactive elements that I could do, like micro decisions and really rapid decisions that almost simulate a video game, in a sense, that you just can't do in print. So I even have a full game show within How to Be Bad. It's actually a real game show that the reader plays against contestants, and the contestants do different things depending on your decisions. So it's just a lot of fun. Yeah.
It only took you twice longer? I think that would take me forever.
Yeah, twice as long. Well, if you have the right tools for the job, it takes less time. I was talking to one of my editor for that book. He used to write choose your own adventure-esque books back in the day, and he was telling me he used like drafting software that like engineers use. And he was telling me how much of a nightmare that was to write and to plan. And these days, I guess use Scrivener, which is the most writers' program of choice these days, and that just allows you to stack decisions and just a very clever use of linking between documents within a document, and it's pretty easy to put together, easier than you might think.
Is that how you got the links? Because you choose certain segments and it jumps you around.
Yeah,
That's cool. Have you ever read the Lone Wolf books?
I have not.
You should try that out sometime. I mean, they're old books, but they are like choose your own adventure type thing, but they have like a random numbering element to it and stats. So it's like a super light role playing game mixed in with choose your own fate thing. It's the only thing I've ever seen like that, but I think you'd find it interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's amazing. Like the interactive fiction genre is definitely growing. There's a lot more people writing it now than in the past. So the sky's the limit, really.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you have 2 of them out, right? Or is there more?
Yep, I have 2. How to Be Bad is the first one, and then I have another called Festival of Shadows, and that is a fantasy. It's about a teddy bear who has to rescue his owner from the boogeyman, and he chases him into a nightmare world and has to rescue him by sunrise. And if he doesn't, then all kinds of heck breaks loose. And so all the characters in that book are toys. It's I describe it as Toy Story meets David Bowie's Labyrinth. And so all of the decisions are more playful. And Theo is a headstrong teddy bear. He's bold and just very hard to get along with because he's got a hero complex and all he cares about is rescuing his owner. And he has to face all these different challenges and all these evil toys that don't want him to succeed. So it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot more action packed as well. And there's a sequel to Festival of Shadows coming out next year.
Oh, cool. So as people are listening to this, they can start to learn that you have some really creative concepts. And that continues in your other fiction work because you have Android X and Eaton. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. And Android X and Eaton are my traditional novels. I say, quote, traditional, as you just read them straight through. There's no interactive elements. But Eaton is funny because in a lot of ways, it's my origin story. When I was on the hospital, I was on a lot of painkillers and I was doped up on morphine and I was having these crazy hallucinations. And I wanted a hamburger. Like that's... it's funny when you're in the hospital, you have these weird cravings, because you're on a liquid diet. And one day I just had this hallucination of this giant hamburger sitting on my windowsill, and he wanted me to escape from the hospital room. And I just remember that so vividly. And like that just made me think, like, what would a novel with food as characters look like? And that's kind of how the story was born. Eaton essentially is it's a story about a group of vegetable terrorists attempting to take down an empire of processed foods. And so it takes place in the world of food. A lot of the characters are personified. There's an empire of processed foods who's basically on the verge of taking over the world. They basically destroyed the vegetable kingdom. They've destroyed the fruit kingdom. Processed foods live in this giant futuristic city, and vegetables live there as second-class citizens. And the hero of the story, Brock, who's broccoli with a bad boy temperament, he wants revenge against Sodius, who's the leader of the processed foods, for killing his sister. And so he is fighting against them, and it's inspired by Final Fantasy VII. It's got elements from kind of my favorite RPGs, some of my favorite stories, and it's kind of a mix mash of a lot of different elements, but it's quirky, it's funny, and it's also dark at the same time. It's kind of my style of writing.
Very cool.
It's kind of weird, I know, but that's what a lot of people say. Oh, that sounds really weird, but when they read it, they like it. So,
Are you ever wanting to turn any of these into video games?
oh, absolutely. I think Eaton would be an awesome RPG, kind of like Final Fantasy. That's kind of my dream, I think, is to write a video game someday, particularly an RPG in that style. I just think that'd be a blast, just the cinematics and the battle systems, and I think that would be really fun to design.
And what about Android X? What's that about?
Yeah, Android X is completely different. It's a futuristic story with androids, naturally, because of the title.
Is it Android food?
No, not Android food. No Android food. Some people, when I describe my books, they say, "You have androids and vegetables and teddy bears in the same book." No, no. I
That would be a
have to
weird
get
book.
that disclaimer. They're not all in the same book. But this is takes place in the year 2300, and humanity has just survived a devastating singularity, and humans and androids live in peace. And there's a one world government. Everything's good. There's an android army that protects the world, and one day things go rogue. An android goes rogue and starts killing a bunch of people, and the hero of the story, X, is a secret agent who's an android, and him and his partner are investigating the crimes and trying to figure out, number one, why the android went rogue, and number two, who's behind it. And that just leads to this great techno thriller with a lot of action, explosions, and android battles.
And his human sidekick is called Shortcut.
Yeah, his human sidekick is called Shortcut.
Where'd you come up with that name? Because I mean, even the character has someone teasing about it, like, what's your real name?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a line in the book where he doesn't want to give his real name, so they ask him what his real name is, and he says Mr. Shortcut. Referred to. Yeah, I just came up with that name. I like finding weird and unique names that describe a character. I actually keep a notebook of interesting names that I come across. So if I hear something that I think that would be an interesting name for a novel, I jot it down and use it for a later date.
Cool. So is it because he likes to get those artificial enhancements, like taking a shortcut? Is that the idea?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, the Shortcut is a human who wants to be an android, and he buys a lot of artificial enhancements, and just wants to enhance his body, and he likes to take shortcuts too. So he's kind of one that he's a little naive and immature at times. So yeah, that kind of describes him perfectly.
And tell us a little bit more about your short stories and poetry.
Yeah, they're how I got my start. They're my humble beginnings. It's funny. A couple of years ago, there was a time when I said I would never write a short story.
Mm-hmm.
I only wrote poetry. So I got my start in college. I got the bug by writing some poems and just loved it. And I was writing poems, going ho-hum, and life was great, life was grand, and I said I would never write a short story. And one of my good writer friends said, no, man, you really should. I think you would enjoy it. And so he twisted my arm and wrote some short stories and found out that I liked them. First stories were pretty horrible, but it was fun. And then I said I would never write a novel. And now, fast forward to now, and I have over 10 of them. But it's just great because short stories and poetry allow you to practice your craft. So with poetry, I learned to really be clear and crisp and specific with my imagery. Mm-hmm. So when I'm describing something, using just the right words to convey a tone, right? Or a color, or give a sense of what a character's seeing. Mm-hmm. Poetry's great for that, and it exercises your mind in a different way than writing a novel. And short stories are great because they let you practice different elements of the craft. So, for example, if you wanted to experiment on a story with second person point of view, or if you wanted to practice writing in the Western genre, and your normal genre might be science fiction, you could write a short story. And you learn a lot in that small period of time. And if it doesn't work out, the only thing you're out is, a few hours of your time. So I write short stories because they keep me on top of my craft, and the poetry helps keep me on top of describing things so that when I get to my novels, I'm at the top of my game.
Do you release your short stories online, or are they? Do you collect them in books?
Yeah, I have one short story collection out on the market right now. I do submit them to professional magazines in hopes of publication. That's one area of my business that's cash flow section, because short stories magazines do pay pretty good money these days. But those that don't end up getting accepted, I usually will end up collecting those, so my readers can buy them, and I also give them away on my mailing list too as a bonus.
So novels, short stories, poetry, interactive fiction. Is there any other formats that you've done or you want to do, like script writing or writing a play?
Yeah, I would love to do all of those one day. But what I find is when I get away from my core, which would be fiction, mm-hmm. I have to dial myself back in. I had the chance to write a screenplay earlier this year, but I said no because it just dilutes my focus. So, but long term, the writers that I most admire when I was growing up were the ones who were versatile. Robert Louis Stevenson, for example, he's the author who wrote Treasure Island. He's just an amazing novel. He wrote everything. He wrote novels, he wrote short stories, he wrote poetry, he wrote plays, he wrote essays, and I just was mesmerized by that. And that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. I just wanted to be able to to be a writer and experience, the different elements of writing everything. So I would love to write a play. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And I think an essay collection, like a nonfiction, would be a lot of fun too down the road.
And you have some nonfiction books, right?
Yes, I've written a couple nonfiction books. I've written a couple for poets, and I've written some nonfiction books for authors to help them be professionals in their careers.
Mm-hmm. And so let's go back to your YouTube channel, Author Level Up. What motivated you to jump from writing a book to starting your own YouTube channel?
When I started out, I struggled because, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast interview, there's tons of information out there. And that's a blessing. It's also a curse because there's a lot of information out there. A lot of it's good, but a lot more of it is bad. And when you're just starting out, it's very hard to discern between the two when you don't have the benefit of wisdom and experience to go through it. And I made a lot of mistakes when I started out. I didn't know anything about covers. I, just didn't know about the way that you should approach being a business person as an author, because that's what you have to be to succeed in this new world of publishing. And so I made a lot of missteps. I took advice that wasn't necessarily bad. It just was bad for me. And so one of the things that I wish that I would have had was that filter, right? That ability to discern between good and bad advice, that flashlight that shines through the darkness that to show me whether something would be a mistake or not. And so I created Author Level Up, which is my YouTube channel, as a way to help other authors who are just starting out and other authors who are established in their careers level up to the next part in their career. And I wish it was the resource that I would have had when I was just starting out. So I do videos 3 times a week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and I do writing craft videos to help you take your writing craft to the next level. And I try to cover things that aren't covered elsewhere. And Fridays, I do business videos to help authors be more savvy entrepreneurs and learn the business of being an author. So I give business lessons. And then on Saturdays, I do marketing tips, ways to recoup your investment.
And there's a lot of great videos there. I've been watching your channel the last few weeks. And one of my favorites is the 10 plots one, where you outline 10 different kind of approaches to plotting. I had to take a little bit of gathering information there. What's a couple of your favorite videos so far you've done?
Sure. Well, that would be on the list. The one you're referring to, I did a video. It's called 10 Different Ways to Outline Your Novel. So one thing authors love to do is outline, right? I'm no exception. And when I was starting out, I found that there were tons of different ways to outline and tons of different ways to approach your story. You could take a character focus, you could take a story focus, you could take, one of the methods starts with writing your product description first, which is, hard to think about, when you don't have a novel. But there's so many different ways to do it. And so I studied all of them and I practiced all of them, believe it or not, in my short stories and in my novels. And so I thought a great idea for a video would just be talking about all of them. So I just go through each of the 10 major, there's more, there's always more, but 10 of the major ways that you can outline a novel in today's world of publishing. And I talk about them and give examples of different plots. And yeah, that one's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good one. Is there another favorite of yours that stands out to you? I know you've done a lot of them, but
yeah, I've done a lot of videos. But the ones that definitely stand out, I can think of 2 more. And one of them is on the writing software Ulysses. Have you heard of that?
I saw your video. I hadn't heard of it until your video.
Yeah, well, for those out there who use Scrivener, which is, I mentioned earlier, many writers' favorite program of choice, Ulysses is a competitor in the space, which is very interesting because it allows you to basically do all the things that Scrivener lets you do, but it's got a really elegant interface. It syncs across all of your devices. So it uses iCloud, so you can write on your Mac and then pick up your iPod and start where you left off. And it has a mobile version on your iPhone, which is fantastic as well. And Ulysses helped me double my word counts. And I loved the software so much that I did a video on it, just basically showing people how to use it and allowing them to see it so that they can see how it affect their author career. So that's been one of my most popular videos to date. And another video I'll mention that I really enjoyed, that's just one of my personal favorites, is it's called On Confidence. Mm-hmm. So as part of my job, I attended a seminar, my day job in insurance. I attended a seminar where one of the guys was talking about just business lessons that apply it to insurance and how to be a consummate professional in everything that you do. And he was talking about confidence and how there are 4 kinds of different confidence. And when he was talking about it, it really resonated with me as something that would apply to authors, right? There's the technical confidence, which, it's just how to write a book, right? Mm-hmm. How do you tell a story? How do you build a website? The really hands-on technical stuff. There's the relational confidence, which is how you give a podcast interview, how you relate to other people, interpersonal sort of things, extroverted behaviors, right? And then there's the influential. So it's your ability to influence other people to make mutual wins. So that's an important confidence to have. Some people don't have that. And then there's the self-confidence, right? It's your ability to have faith in yourself, even when things aren't going very well, and to just know that you have the ability to see whatever it is that you're doing through. And so I made a video on that, relating that to authors and the author life. And that's been a pretty popular video too.
Yeah, it's great. I think a lot of authors or writers or filmmakers, artists pretty much, have to deal with their self-confidence wavering at times. So we talked a little bit earlier about the YouTube channel, why you started up, because you had a hard time finding solid information sometimes. Is there one piece of advice out there that you've heard that that you really would caution authors, like up-and-coming authors, to perhaps not listen to, or at least consider really carefully?
Well, I could be here all night. I really could. And I guess I have to be sort of politically correct in how I frame this. But one of the things that I would caution people against is the idea that writing is like a shark, right? You have to release a book, and then that book's going to sink like a stone. So you have to keep swimming in order to stay afloat. You do. It is all about product. It's all about releasing new works. But I think some authors tend to focus too much on the marketing and promotion side. They think that if a book is not selling, all of a sudden they freak out and all of a sudden have to figure out what ads they can buy. Where can I put the book? Who do I have to email, to get the book to sell? And there's just this crazy urgency that a lot of authors have right now. And I just caution them against that, because when you're in a hurry, when you're urgent, that's when you tend to make mistakes that you're going to regret 5 to 10 years from now. So what I would tell people is just focus on finding that passion. Write what you love. Don't pay attention to what the market is doing. Don't write books, don't write Western just because Westerns are hot. Write Westerns because you love to write Westerns, and your books will find a market. So that's what I would tell people. And just that it might take a little bit longer than you think, but 5 to 10 years from now, it's going to be worth it.
Mm-hmm. How about, if you don't mind sharing a couple more writing tips?
Sure.
Perhaps one that's more craft oriented and one's a little more business oriented.
You bet. Well, craft oriented, I would always say that there are nuanced layers to learning. So just when you think you know something will happen that makes you realize how little you know about that thing. For a lot of authors, that could be book covers. It could be ebook formatting with a lot of EPUB standards, or how to format a paperback. Just keep your mind open to learning, especially when it comes to writing stories and writing craft. There are a lot of things that they seem very simple on their surface, like how to open a story, for example, or how to plot a novel. Perfect example that we've talked about, right? Mm-hmm. They seem simple on the surface, and it's easy to say, okay, well, yeah, story has to have a beginning, middle, end. Next thing, please. Well, it's actually not that simple. Don't confuse simple with easy. There are a lot of things that you're going to learn over the course of your career as a craftsperson, as an artist, different tools that you can use in your toolbox, and I just caution a lot of people, and I advise them, because keep your mind open and never think that you know it all, because just when you think that, that's a very dangerous mindset to have. Oh, yeah. You just have to keep learning. There's a million things to learn. And I personally enjoy that. I enjoy the fact that it's kind of overwhelming, like all the things that you have to learn to be a successful author, from writing the book to soft skills. And I like that challenge. That's exciting to me. And I guess I would say for another business task, I would say it's hard to learn business, but the best way you can learn about business and how to be a savvy entrepreneur or creative person is to see what other businesses are doing, pull the bits and pieces from that are interesting, and apply those to your business. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I guess here in the States, there's a show called Shark Tank, and I know there's different variations across across the globe. But I love that show. And the reason I love it is because, entrepreneurs come up into a room of, 5 different investors and they pitch their startup ideas. And it's so interesting and fascinating to listen to the investors poke holes or ask questions about their businesses in a very perceptive and astute way that really make you think about, hey, that's interesting. Like, yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting way to think about marketing, or it's an interesting way to think about your product or how to position things. So that's really interesting. And there's a lot of business oriented reality television that's great for that too, like Hotel Impossible. If anyone's ever seen that, he's a hotel guy. I mean, he's a master of hotels and service, and he's just a hotel magnate. And he goes into these hotels and he tells all these people exactly what's wrong. And he has some really, really interesting ideas and insights that you can totally apply to being an author. So that's what I would say. If you're struggling with learning business, look at other businesses and see what they're doing. Take out what applies to you, but don't buy everything wholesale, because there's some business advice out there that's not really good for authors too. But that just comes with experience and wisdom.
And what are you currently working on, or have you just released?
Yeah, I'm currently working on my upcoming fantasy series called Old Dark. That's about a fallen dragon lord who's seeking revenge on the conspiracy that overthrew him. So that's going to be fun. That's definitely the most different thing I've ever written, and that'll be launching late August.
Awesome. So you have a lot of protagonists that are different species. Is that ever challenging to you? Should I get in their head a little bit?
It is. It can be. It's fun though, because you really start thinking like it's like using a different muscle, right? Like I have to think not so much about how a human would react, but what would a dragon say in this situation, and what would a dragon's history look like? How would a dragon see the world? And I think that's a great exercise for any person in the creative arts, is try not to just get in the head of humans. What would it be like if you were inside the head of a wine bottle? For example, Hans Christian Andersen did that in a short story once. He wrote a story about a wine bottle with a personality, and it was crazy. It sounds crazy, but it was awesome. And so that kind of thing inspires me. And I am drawn to the head turning, non-human protagonist types. So dragons, teddy bears, vegetables, that's my brand. And I would just tell people that it's fun to try to step outside the box.
All right. And where can our listeners find you and your work online?
You can find my fiction at www.michaellaronn.com. And if you sign up from a mailing list there, you get a free sampler starter library that has samples of all of my books in it. And if you're interested in my YouTube channels or any of the author advice that I've given in this podcast episode, you can go to www.authorlevelup.com, and that links up to my YouTube channel, and you can watch all the videos there.
Yeah, I would encourage everybody to check it out. I'm really loving your YouTube channel, and thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Marks.
Hi, I'm Dean Wesley Smith, USA Today best-selling writer of well over 100 novels and 17 million copies in print. And you are listening to Genretainment.
Well, thanks to Michael for chatting with Marks, and sorry I wasn't able to make the call to join in the fun.
Yeah, and if you're an author or wannabe, be sure to check out his YouTube channel. Now, before we go, we want to remind you that you can always keep track of us by subscribing to us on iTunes or Stitcher, or by following our Genretainment Facebook page. My Twitter account, which is at Mr. Marks, it's MRMARX, our website at genretainment.com, or follow all the shows at sci-fi-pulse-radio.com.
We'll be back soon with all new guests from our favorite films, TV shows, novels, and web series.
Genretainment is a production of Alien Jungle Bug Productions.
Until next time. Bad monkey.